Local government means caring about people, and in Southwark that's a big responsibility. But we face severe financial difficulties. Every local authority has been pressurised to reduce spending. This has happened in several ways. First, the cuts in government grants. Then, financial penalties for overspending. Finally, by rate capping. Southwark's response, like many other inner London boroughs, has been to use every legal means possible to protect our services, to protect our community. We've done this by increasing rates while we could, and by using financial devices in the last year or two. But time has now run out. There are no indications that things will get better for local government. We have to pay our bills. We have to meet our responsibilities to the people of the borough.
I'm Anne Matthews and I'm leader of the council. We've made this video because we wanted to tell you directly why we must take hard decisions about the future of Southwark. 4 years of rate capping mean that we have to keep vital services going with less and less money from the government. This isn't what we wanted to do. It's not the policy we were elected on, but this is the situation we are now in. So I'd like to explain to you, just as I did in my letter at Christmas, what the thinking is behind our 3-year financial strategy. First, let me nail any rumours you may have heard. Any changes we have to make will be negotiated. There will be no compulsory redundancies. In spite of everything, we still want to improve the quality of services for all the people of Southwark. So please listen to the facts and the arguments, because I believe you will accept this as a positive step forward.
The council is obliged by law to balance what it spends with its income. For this financial year, which will end in March 1988, this is what Southwark is committed to spending. The biggest amount, £103 million, is required to pay off loans which are used for the council's past and present capital spending programmes. Then, we pay £100 million for staff salaries and wages. The council's other running expenses amount to £88 million, most of that going on council house repairs and the costs of running council premises. That leaves a further £44 million which we pay out in housing benefits such as rent and rate rebates. Over half of the households in Southwark receive some housing benefit. That's a total of £335 million. So where does our income come from to pay for this? This year, we'll get £160 million from various government grants and subsidies, of which the biggest is called the Block Grant. We'll have £61 million from the rates, and roughly the same amount, £57 million, from rents. But that leaves us short by another £57 million. We can earn about half of that from charges made by the council for a variety of services. We can make up the gap this year just by resorting to some special accounting measures called CAPITALISATION. We'll spread this year's costs over future years too. But now there is no more room for manoeuvre. The government controls both how much we receive in grants and how much we can raise on the rates. To balance our books over the next few years, we have to find the remedies inside Southwark. To get a better idea of the extent of the problem faced by the council, we need to look at the spending on each of our services, or rather, what they cost over and above the income they are able to bring in from charges and rents. The biggest budget was that for housing, £48 million, followed closely by social services with £43.5 million. Public services like roads, refuse and street cleaning spent £25 million. Council finance and administration accounted for £15 million. Leisure and recreation, providing everything from libraries to leisure centres, spent £14 million, while other services took up another £14.5 million. This grand total of £160 million has to be paid for from the government block grant and the rates. This expenditure was paid for this year by £73 million of government grant and £61 million income from the rates. That adds up to £134 million, and that's the limit on the council's expenditure set by the government, as they will not give any more block grant nor allow us to put up the rates any further. But we need £160 million, which leaves us with a gap of £26 million. This year, as we have explained, we can make up the shortfall by those special accounting measures. But in future years, these will not be available to us to the same extent. Over the next 3 years, our expenditure will increase substantially simply as a result of inflation costs and growth to which the Council is already committed. However, this expenditure has to be reconciled with the expected amount the government will allow the Council to spend. At present, in our projections for the next 3 years, that shortfall is going to get worse, and no accounting procedures will cure it. In the next financial year, we estimate the Council will have to find a further £40 million just to balance the books, and by 1990, that figure will have grown to £56 million. We have very few options if we are to survive and continue to do our job. Those options are capitalisation, one of the special accounting measures already adopted by the Council, an increase in council rents to bring in more income, and staffing reductions and efficiency reviews to cut expenditure. In the past, many boroughs have reduced their budget shortfalls through what's come to be called creative accounting. In Southwark, the use of balances and capitalisation have been most important. Balances, those monies left over at the end of past financial years, have now disappeared. And capitalisation is just an accounting procedure for transferring the cost of revenue spending to the Council's capital account. This means that instead of using capital resources to improve the fabric of the borough for years to come, they are being used for day-to-day running costs. So it is not a long-term solution, and its use has already been restricted by the government. If we look again at the expected budget shortfalls over the next 3 years, £40 million next year, rising to £56 million by 1990, the Council has decided that the use of capitalisation as a means of bridging the gap will have to be reduced as far as possible. Next year it should account for £20 million, half the budget shortfall. But by 1990-91, that will fall to £10 million.
Our budget shortfall can only be eased a little by capitalisation, and the government may make it even more difficult over the coming months. So we've been forced to look at other options to bridge the gap. Unfortunately, those options are very limited, and the decisions have been very hard. Inevitably, the effects of our lack of money will be felt both by those of you who work for the Council and by local people. But we've done our best to strike a balance, to be fair to everyone.
Southwark spends more on housing than any other service, and there are only very limited means of reducing the costs. Government housing subsidy plays a major role in financing this expenditure, and if spending is cut back below a certain level, we begin to lose that subsidy pound for pound as well. So the Council has to look to housing income to help reduce the budget shortfall. Council house rents are the largest source of income after the government's block grant and the rates. Even so, in order to meet Southwark's housing costs, income from the rates also has to be used. And that contribution from rates to housing expenditure has been growing bigger. Without any further increase in rents, it would reach £60 million by 1990-91. The Council has chosen a steady increase in rents of £3 per week each year for the next 3 years to help bridge the budget gap. This will reduce the shortfall by £9 million next year and by £27 million by 1990-91. But not all of that money will have to come from the council tenants themselves. Half the amount each year will in fact come from the government indirectly, through housing benefits paid to tenants.
Because the government will be obliged to pay out more housing benefit to help people cope with the rent increases, this is one of the few ways left to the council to force the government to put back into Southwark at least some of the money it's withheld. The great majority of people living in Southwark are council tenants, and we know rent increases will cause them problems, so we will be stepping up our campaign to see that as many tenants as possible get the housing benefits to which they are entitled. But if we're not to put up rents further, we have to look at other options.
The council looked hard at which costs could be changed in the short term. Running costs like office accommodation or financial costs like interest payments are difficult to change, or outside the council's control. But over the last 5 years, the number of people employed by the council has grown. With this rise in staff numbers, staffing costs have increased considerably. But they can be held down by maintaining existing vacancy levels. 17% for officer posts and 10% for manual worker posts. By additional staff reductions of 3 to 5% per year for the next 3 years, sufficient savings can be made to meet the remaining budget shortfall almost completely. This would leave comparatively small savings to be found through service efficiency reviews.
Each year for the next 3 years, we expect to see some 250 to 400 jobs go. But by negotiating early retirement, redeployment and retraining, I want to reassure you again that we intend to accomplish these changes without making anyone redundant who wants to go on working for the council. But we face an even greater challenge than this. We now face the threat of privatisation, and we need your help. Under the new local government laws, Southwark will have to put out to tender its refuse collection, street sweeping, catering, ground maintenance and general cleaning. So in the next few months, we will be consulting local people for their views and ideas on council services. Only by showing we can make these services better and more efficient can we win through. If we fail, both services and jobs will be lost. Together we must stop this happening. The changes which the government is forcing on us, new financial restrictions, privatisation, new laws on housing and the poll tax, will change all our lives. But I would ask you to remember one thing about this council. We will always do everything we can to protect services and to be a good employer.